Welcome to Property Chat with Pete. Thank you so much for joining me once again. Today we'll be talking about cash flow versus capital gain. If you are a property investor or if you're looking to become a property investor, you need to understand that there is a difference oftentimes between cash flow and capital gain, and you need to decide what type of property investment you're looking to attach your portfolio to. Do you want a portfolio that's going to give you capital gains, or do you want a portfolio that's going to give you cash flow, positive cash flow, or you want one that does both? Some people don't want one that does both. They'd rather settle for either or, but I'll talk to you more about that shortly. So cash flow. What does it mean if I want a property and I want to invest in a property for cash flow purposes? To give you an example about a cash flow property, a cash flow focused property, you'll often look at apartments. Apartments are generally not that great in terms of how fast they're able to gain you capital growth, depending on where you buy them, obviously. It varies from place to place and location to location, and depending on the time of the market. But cash flow is oftentimes the focus for when you're wanting to buy an apartment, because you potentially could get more than one person in the apartment, if it's a student accommodation, if you will, and therefore being able to increase your rent that you're getting from that property or from that apartment. And then also, if you're looking at a house, for example, you could be buying a house, but the house is potentially negatively geared. So the cash flow is not necessarily covering whatever the expenses are. That means it's a negatively geared property, and therefore you potentially are looking at that property from a capital gain perspective, because for the long term you want to make sure that that property is growing in value so that you can use that equity or that value and take that out and buy more properties and do whatever else you want to do with it. Okay? Cash flow properties, if it needs to be a positively cash flow property for an investor, they're looking for a minimum generally of 5%. You would want to look at a minimum of 5% cash flow to make it cash flow positive. So a 5% yield. Again, if you don't know this terminology, if you don't understand what to do or work it out, feel free to go to the form on my website, peterhileyconsulting.com. Get in touch with me. I'll get someone in touch with you, an accountant or a professional who can help you in this process. Okay, so capital gain, many people or investors who invest in property can sometimes vary in terms of what they want to actually get from their actual purchase. So some of them want a short-term capital gain, and some of them actually want a long-term capital gain, and some want a long-term capital gain as well as cash flow. All right, that is sort of someone that's in it for the long game. However, developers generally, they may purchase a property that they want to subdivide and quickly sell off. So they don't do anything to the property. All they went to do is they went to council and said, can you please provide me a subdivision on this property? Councils approved the subdivision. They did nothing else but sold then the subdivided properties, which they divided into two, to someone else to make some money. Okay, and often make a decent amount of money from that. Sometimes also what they could, developers could do is they could go to, for example, a farm and say, look, I'll subdivide this entire piece of land for you and give you X amount of the profits that I make from selling it. Would you agree to doing that? Great, let's do it. So there's different ways that they could do that, but that's probably more of a long-term focus. But short-term, developer comes in, says, I've got connections and I want to help you to get some money from this property. You don't want to live here anymore, or there's a deceased estate. Can we buy this property from you guys and we'll subdivide it and sell it off, or build one on it, whatever it is that they want to do. That's generally short-term. Short-term, another option would be renovating a property. So you find a property in a great location, you renovate the property, you know there's going to be value in that renovation because you bought it under market value at a really great price. You add your flair to it, you have a rental appraisal, and you have a property appraisal done by a real estate professional afterwards. They tell you what the property is now going to sell for. That is called the value of gain in the property. And therefore, that could all be done within 6 months. You potentially could then sell it or use that equity to then go ahead and purchase some more properties. All right, so that's another option you could look at doing. Then another way that you could look at a short-term is or a short-term sort of capital gain is if someone comes to you and says, look, I've got a property that's in Timbuktu, I cannot afford to hold it anymore, I want to sell it. Okay, that's what we call a distressed property. Great, yep, I can help you purchase that property. Let me purchase it from you. And once you've purchased it from the individual, you think to yourself, hey, I don't want to hold on to this property for the long term, but I know this is a great deal I'm getting by buying this property because I'm looking at properties in the area, they're selling for X amount and within a certain amount of time. So I'll buy this property for X and then sell it within a month or two of purchasing it for X amount of money. Remember to keep in mind, obviously, there will probably be capital gains tax and all those things you need to think about. But make sure you speak to a professional or an accountant throughout this process. So those are the different aspects from a short-term perspective. Now we're looking at the long-term perspective. When someone wants to buy a property just for capital gain, they potentially could buy a property, leave it vacant for a certain period of time because they know that the capital gain in that area or the growth in that area has been phenomenal potentially. And they want to just grab that opportunity to put their money somewhere and bank it while it sits and grows in value. And they don't have to do anything to it. They just have it sitting there vacant. I know that's not the best. I definitely would not want to do that myself, because if you can put someone in the property to get a cash flow potentially from it as well, that could be it. But some people have cash money they just want to keep somewhere and do that with. So that's one option. Another option could be obviously holding it to gain a return on value and then potentially sell as well for the long term. You could decide to sell it over 20 years. You could decide to sell it within 10 years, whatever it is that you're looking to do. All right. Another option could be you want to gain a return and cash flow, as well as you want to gain value from that property, which is what most investors generally tend to do, is they see the property giving them say 5% return in yield. In addition, they know that that area has gone up in value tenfold over the past 10 years. So within 10 years, they'll cash in on that equity, buy another few properties or another property and keep going from there. So I hope that gives you some clarity on cash flow versus capital gain. Thank you.